Congressman, thanks so much for being here.
Good to be here, Casey.
So, of course, as we watch this unfold over the weekend, now we see this retaliation. You know what it's like when the decisions that are made in Washington hit the real world. You have put yourself in harm's way for the country. Do you think that the president did the right thing here, especially considering how Iran has responded?
It's too early to tell. We just don't know. Because if this goes well and Iran's nuclear program is genuinely stopped and they're actually able to negotiate a long-term deal to keep eyes on, intrusive inspections to make sure that they're never able to restart their program, then we might look back on this as a good decision. We should have a very important debate about whether it was constitutional. There have been presidents on both sides of the aisle who have taken military action like this without consulting Congress, and there are some serious legal issues that need to be raised. But looking forward, we have to figure out now how we continue to prevent Iran from having a nuclear weapons program. And if these strikes end up being part of that whole story, then people might actually see it as successful down the road.
Do you think that if, in fact, that happens, it will have been worth it?
Well, look, let's be clear. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. And for all the very legitimate questions that many of my colleagues are raising about how this action was taken and about the risks of wider war, which we absolutely cannot get into. We cannot get bogged down into a wider war in the Middle East. We also have to all agree that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapons program. And we've tried for a long time to make sure that that doesn't happen. Now, this is the president, of course, who pulled out of the deal that kept them at least a year away from getting a bomb, that served as a baseline upon which more deals could have been struck to further prevent them from enriching uranium, prevent them from getting the ballistic missiles. It provided a diplomatic baseline to do exactly what he's now saying he wants to do, which is to get back into a deal. So when you look at the whole history here, Trump has been all over the map. But let's not lose sight of our clear objectives. Iran is a regime that has constantly said death to Israel, death to America. They have threatened American troops. They're threatening them today. They killed a lot of my colleagues on the ground in Iraq. And we cannot allow a regime like this to have a nuclear weapon. And they're further away from that now than they were a few weeks ago.
One of your colleagues in the House, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, posted that this was essentially an impeachable offense, the fact that he did this without asking Congress. Do you agree with that?
Well, look, I voted for Donald Trump's impeachment twice. This is a convicted felon who's president of the United States. But you could use her same argument to say that Obama should have been impeached when he started a war in Libya without consulting Congress. So I think that actually the blame really is on Congress. We have abrogated our Article 1 authority to make these decisions, to take these decisions upon ourselves. And frankly, Speaker Johnson should have called us back to Washington to actually have this debate that members of both parties have said we should have.
What does it tell you that this administration still, as of our understanding, or at least when I sat down to do the show, our understanding was the Gang of Eight still had not been briefed. The Democratic members of the Gang of Eight still had not been briefed. What does it tell you that the administration is briefing top Republicans but not Democrats on this? That
they care more about partisan politics than national security. And they care more about partisan politics than keeping our operational secrets safe. I understand that they even tipped off Fox News before they told Democratic officials in Congress. And at the end of the day, they want to just continue dividing the country. That has always been Trump's political aim. That's dangerous when you have a commander-in-chief who's more interested in politics than strategic victory, who always puts political considerations first. As John Bolton, one of Trump's former officials, said, Trump's going to make this decision based on what he thinks will make him look best in the light of history. It's all about himself. When you heard Secretary Hegseth at the press conference with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Hegseth was always talking about Trump, not the troops. The chairman, on the other hand, was talking about these heroic actions by the pilots and other servicemen and women who made this operation happen. For Trump, the focus is always on him. And that's dangerous when you have someone like that making decisions that affect our troops' lives.
One conversation that we're having here, of course, has been around the idea of regime change. President Trump kind of floated that a little bit earlier today. The conversation has dialed down since we've seen what Iran's response has been initially. But is there a world where you think the United States should support regime change in Iran if it were to prevent them from getting a nuclear bomb?
Not if it gets us dragged into another endless war in the Middle East. We can't afford to do that. I think Americans know viscerally we don't want to be in a ground war in the Middle East because of our experiences in Iraq and Afghanistan. But also, if you just look strategically at where we are in the world, let's not forget the greatest national security threat to the United States is China in the Pacific. That's why successive Democratic and Republican presidents have said we have to deter war in the Pacific. We're not going to deter war in the Pacific if China sees us bogged down in the Middle East. But having said all of that, let's also be clear that this is an evil Iranian regime that hangs its own people if they disagree, that seeks out women to disappear them from the streets and torture them in prison if they are not wearing head coverings, that hangs people from cranes if they're gay. I mean, so this is an evil regime that wants to obliterate the United States and our allies. Am I in favor of regime change? Yes. I just don't want to have a ground war to make it happen.
All right. Congressman Seth Moulton, very grateful to have you, sir. Thanks very much for being here. All right. See you next time. All right. Coming up next here, back to the Middle East.